It is a Tuesday evening in Woodlands. Hafiz is 48 years old. Project engineer. Monthly income, 8,000 Singapore dollars. He has a 4-room HDB that he and his wife bought 15 years ago for $380,000. The mortgage is finished. The flat, in today's resale market, is worth approximately $630,000. He is sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a CPF statement. He runs the retirement projection. CPF Life Standard Plan. Full retirement sum. Payout at 65. $1,780 a month. He sits with that number for a moment. The Singlife Financial Freedom Index asked Singaporeans themselves what they need in retirement to live comfortably. Not luxuriously, not extravagantly, comfortably. The answer was $2,856 a month. The gap is $1,076 every month for 20 years. He closes the laptop. 3 floors above him, in the same block, his neighbour Priya, 55, retired teacher, fully paid up 5-room flat, sold her unit 2 months ago and moved to Johor Bahru. Hafiz thought she was running away from something. He is starting to think she was running the same numbers he just ran, and she got there first. There is a version of this conversation happening in kitchens across Singapore right now, not just in Woodlands, in Tampines, in Bishan, in Holland Village, in Toa Payoh. Across income levels, across age brackets, across people who have done almost everything right and are still sitting with a number that does not add up. This video is the math they are all running. First, the scale of what is happening. In a Sunway property study, nearly 1 in 2 Singaporeans said they are actively interested in purchasing property in Johor, for retirement, as a second home, for rental income, or as an investment. Nearly 1 in 2. A separate poll of 1,548 people asked directly, would you move to Johor Bahru to avoid the high cost of living in Singapore? 55% said yes. A black box research survey found 1 in 3 Singaporeans would seriously consider retiring across the border once cross-border travel becomes convenient. That convenience is no longer a promise. It is a construction project that is 90% complete. The Johor Bahru Singapore Rapid Transit System Link. 4 kilometers of rail. Woodlands North MRT on the Thomson East Coast Line to Bukit Chagar Station in central Johor Bahru. Journey time, 5 minutes. Capacity, 10,000 passengers per hour in each direction. Immigration cleared once, at the station you depart from. You board. 5 minutes. You walk out into the city. As of July 2026, construction is above 90% complete. First train demonstration already run at Woodlands North. 8 trains manufactured and delivered. Systems testing begins September 2026. Operations targeted for December 2026 to January 2027. For 30 years, the Causeway has been the psychological barrier that kept this arbitrage locked. 45 minutes to 2 hours in a car depending on the day, the queue, the rain. The RTS Link replaces that with 5 minutes and a ticket that will cost between 5 and 7 Singapore dollars each way. What that does to the numbers below is everything. Now, the property gap. Because this is where the math starts to feel unreasonable. In the most active HDB resale market in Singapore as of mid-2026, Tampines, the median resale price for a 5-room flat is 560,000 Singapore dollars. In the mature inner estates, Bishan, Queenstown, Bukit Merah, Toa Payoh, median 5-room HDB prices have crossed $1 million. Not exceptional transactions, the median. In June 2026 alone, 188 HDB flats sold above $1 million. $902 million HDB transactions in Singapore in the first half of 2026. These are Housing Development Board flats, on land the government owns, with 99-year leases that are running down right now, today, as you watch this. Now cross the Causeway. In Johor Bahru, based on actual residential transactions recorded between April 2025 and March 2026, 1,254 transactions across 137 projects. The median residential property price is 530,000 ringgit. At the current exchange rate of 1 Singapore dollar to 3.16 ringgit, that is 167,000 Singapore dollars. 167,000. The median HDB resale in Singapore costs 625,000. The difference is 458,000 Singapore dollars. That is not a discount, that is a separate asset, one that most Singaporeans are choosing to leave on the table by staying put. And critically, most Johor Bahru property at this price level is freehold, not a 99-year lease ticking down. Freehold. The land is yours. Before you read the next section, open the CPF website and find your retirement dashboard. Get your projected CPF life payout number. Write it down. Then write down 2,856, the amount Singaporeans say they need. Keep that gap in your head for everything that follows. Let us start with Hafiz, the engineer in Woodlands. His 4-room HDB is worth approximately $630,000. His CPF refund obligation, the principal he withdrew from his ordinary account over 15 years of mortgage payments, plus the 2.5% accrued interest CPF charges on every dollar used, is approximately $190,000. When he sells, CPF takes that back first. His net proceeds, approximately 440,000 Singapore dollars. In Singapore, that money buys him nothing that changes his retirement. A 2-room resale in a non-mature town, 400,000. He is homeless and cashless simultaneously. In Johor Bahru, 440,000 Singapore dollars is a different conversation entirely. A 2-story freehold terraced house in Mount Austin, established township, 10 minutes from City Square Mall, 15 minutes from the future RTS Link station, costs between 550,000 and 700,000 ringgit. In Singapore dollars, between 174,000 and 221,000. He pays the 8% foreign buyer stamp duty and 3% state consent fee, approximately 11% in transaction costs, around 20,000 Singapore dollars on a $180,000 purchase. Total outlay, approximately 200,000 Singapore dollars. Remaining cash, 240,000 Singapore dollars invested. 240,000 at 4.5% annual yield, $900 a month in passive income. Combined with his CPF life payout of $1,780, $2,680 a month, arriving without touching the principal. His monthly expenses in Johor Bahru at a comfortable standard: groceries, eating out, utilities, a car he now owns outright with no COE, private health insurance, some savings buffer, approximately 2,800 Singapore dollars. The numbers are within $50 of equilibrium. At 62, not 65, 3 years earlier in a freehold house with a garden, with 240,000 in investable capital growing. In Singapore, the same man retires at 65 into a rented room, a $1,076 monthly gap, and a paid-up flat that no longer exists. He has not booked a flight to JB yet, but he has stopped telling himself the question is premature. Now move up. Kevin's neighbour Linda is 61 years old. Former CFO. Fully paid up 3-bedroom condo in Holland Village. She sold for $3,200,000. CPF refund obligation after decades of mortgage, approximately 500,000. Net proceeds, 2,700,000 Singapore dollars. Linda bought a 3-bedroom high-floor unit at R&F Princess Cove, a waterfront development 400 meters from the future Bukit Chagar RTS Link station in Johor Bahru. Purchase price, 1,200,000 ringgit. With transaction costs at 11%, approximately 420,000 Singapore dollars all in. She applied for the Malaysia My Second Home program Silver Tier. This requires a fixed deposit of 150,000 US dollars, approximately 200,000 Singapore dollars, placed in a Malaysian bank. In return, a 5-year renewable visa, full residency rights, 90 days minimum per year in Malaysia. 50% of the deposit can be withdrawn after the first year for property, education, or medical purposes. The interest, 3 to 4% in Malaysian banks, is hers to keep. Foreign income earned outside Malaysia, exempt from Malaysian tax through at least 2036. Linda's total capital deployed, 620,000 Singapore dollars between property and fixed deposit. Remaining investable capital, 2,080,000 Singapore dollars. She puts 1 million into Singapore savings bonds and treasury bills, currently yielding above 3%, fully liquid, principal guaranteed. 800,000 into CSPX and VWRA, Irish domiciled ETFs, 15% dividend withholding instead of 30, no US estate tax exposure. The remaining 280,000 stays as a cash buffer for the first 5 years. Projected monthly income at 4% blended yield, approximately 8,300 Singapore dollars a month. Monthly expenses in Johor Bahru, approximately 4,500 Singapore dollars. A car owned outright, a domestic helper, private healthcare, restaurants, travel, not frugal, comfortable. She is spending 4,500 and keeping 3,800 every month. Her capital is not being consumed, it is compounding. She is not in trouble. She was always early. The Malaysia My Second Home program has 3 tiers. Here are the actual numbers as of 2026. Silver tier, 150,000 US dollars in fixed deposit, approximately 200,000 Singapore dollars. Mandatory property purchase at minimum 600,000 ringgit within 12 months of visa approval. 5-year renewable visa. Minimum 90 days per year in Malaysia. Gold tier, 500,000 US dollars in fixed deposit. Mandatory property purchase at minimum 1 million ringgit. 15-year visa. Platinum tier, 1 million US dollars in fixed deposit. Mandatory property purchase at minimum 2 million ringgit. 20-year visa. The legal point that catches people. As a foreign buyer in Johor, Singaporeans must purchase at a minimum threshold of 1 million ringgit in most zones, approximately 316,000 Singapore dollars, regardless of MM2H tier. Verify the current threshold with a Malaysian solicitor before signing anything. Thresholds have been revised upward before and may be again. Foreign buyer stamp duty as of January 2026, 8% of purchase price. State consent fee, minimum 30,000 ringgit, approximately 3%. Total transaction cost on a 1 million ringgit purchase, approximately 11%. 35,000 Singapore dollars in fees before you hold title. There is a restriction on reselling MM2H property in some Johor zones within 10 years. Selling early may void the visa. This is not a reason to avoid the program. It is a reason to buy the home you intend to live in, not the one you hope to flip. The cost of living gap deserves its own section because the numbers are not subtle. Numbio's cost of living comparison, updated through early 2026. Singapore is 186% more expensive than Johor Bahru across all spending categories. Groceries in Johor Bahru, 52% cheaper. Eating out, 60% cheaper. A full nasi lemak meal with soup, a drink and a side dish at a kopitiam in Johor Bahru, 12 ringgit, under 4 Singapore dollars. Petrol in Malaysia is government subsidized. RON 97, approximately 3 ringgit 50 per litre. No COE. No $126,000 bidding certificate before you can put your name on a car registration. A Toyota Corolla in Malaysia, approximately 120,000 ringgit, 38,000 Singapore dollars. The same car in Singapore, all in with COE, above 160,000 Singapore dollars. Private healthcare, 30 to 70% cheaper depending on procedure. IVF in Johor Bahru, 74% cheaper than Singapore. Knee replacement, 37% cheaper. Heart bypass, 24% cheaper. The hospitals doing this, Glen Eagles Medini, KPJ Johor, Regency Specialist Hospital, are internationally accredited. Most specialists trained in the United Kingdom, Australia, or Singapore. And when the RTS Link opens, Woodlands North to NUH by train and taxi is under 50 minutes. A same-day specialist visit in Singapore becomes realistic from a Johor address. The 1 Singapore dollar to 3.16 ringgit exchange rate means that a lifestyle equivalent to spending 12,000 Singapore dollars a month in Singapore costs approximately 3,800 Singapore dollars when lived in Johor Bahru. Same standard, 32% of the price. That gap does not disappear. Every month it stays. It compounds. The Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone reshapes the picture further, because this is not only a retirement story. Signed in January 2025, the JS-SEZ covers 3,588 square kilometers, more than 4 times the size of Singapore. 9 flagship zones across southern Johor. Corporate tax for qualifying businesses, 5% for 15 years. Personal income tax for qualified knowledge workers employed within the SEZ, 15%, compared to Singapore's top marginal rate of 24%. Singapore-based companies have committed more than 5.5 billion Singapore dollars in investment since the signing. 1,000 investor inquiries being processed. 73 billion ringgit in potential investments under review. This matters because the 5-minute RTS Link is not only for retirees. The same train that Linda uses on a Tuesday afternoon for a Singapore hospital appointment is the train a 34-year-old data engineer uses at 8:45 every morning to reach a Johor SEZ office where her salary is paid in Singapore dollars and taxed at 15%. She lives in a 3-bedroom freehold condo in Iskandar Puteri. Monthly rent, 2,000 ringgit, approximately 633 Singapore dollars. Her equivalent in Singapore, a 2-bedroom in OCR for 3,600, or a room share in Yishun for 1,000. Earning Singapore dollars, spending Malaysian ringgit. 5 minutes between the two. This is what the cross-border professional economy looks like when the infrastructure finally arrives. Now the risks. Because this is not a property advertisement, and these are real, the ringgit has been strengthening. 1 Singapore dollar bought 3.50 ringgit in early 2024. By March 2026, it briefly reached 3.05. It currently sits at 3.16. If the ringgit reaches 2.8, 2.5, the cost arbitrage for a Singaporean spending in Malaysia narrows materially. A retirement plan built entirely on a favourable exchange rate is not a retirement plan. It is a currency trade dressed as a life decision. The people who make this move well are not betting on ringgit staying cheap. They are using lower fixed costs in Johor to liberate more capital into hard currency assets, CSPX, T-bills, Singapore savings bonds, so the portfolio holds value even if the ringgit strengthens. Healthcare coverage is the practical trap nobody warns you about early enough. Singapore Integrated Shield plans and MediShield Life are designed for treatment in Singapore. Many plans do not automatically cover Malaysian private hospital stays, and none cover the Malaysian public hospital system meaningfully. A Singaporean in Johor Bahru who needs 2 weeks of private hospital care faces that bill out of pocket without separate Malaysian coverage. Malaysian private hospital insurance for a healthy 60-year-old, approximately 300 to 500 Singapore dollars a month. This is not optional. It belongs in every JB retirement budget on day 1, not after the first scare. Johor Bahru is car dependent. 90% of residents currently use private vehicles for daily movement. Grab operates in JB and has improved significantly. But if you have regular medical appointments, if you are crossing to Singapore frequently, if your daily life requires flexibility, you need a car. Budget for it. Malaysian car ownership costs a fraction of Singapore, but it is not zero. The crime environment differs from Singapore. JB has improved materially in the last decade, but the habits of a city where you leave your phone on a hawker table and come back 10 minutes later do not transfer directly. For people in their 60s and 70s, that daily adjustment is real and worth acknowledging. Before moving, not after. Managing two countries means two banking systems, two currencies to track, tax residency to maintain correctly on both sides, insurance policies in two jurisdictions, logistics of two addresses. None of this is a reason not to go. All of it is overhead that belongs in the decision, not the fantasy version of it. So who should be running these numbers right now? If you own a fully paid up HDB, a 4-room in Woodlands, a 5-room in Tampines, a flat in Queenstown worth close to $1 million, and your CPF life projection sits between $1,400 and $2,000 a month, and you are between 5 and 10 years from retirement, this is not a question about whether you like Malaysia. This is a question about whether the asset you are living in is producing the return it could produce, or whether it is a cage you have named a home. Every year you remain in that flat, you are making an implicit decision. I prefer to live here rather than convert this asset into income. That can be the right decision. It needs to be a conscious one. If you are 45 to 55 with Singapore income, you can earn remotely, or earn across the border in a JS-SEZ office, and you are watching $3,600 a month go into a 2-bedroom OCR rental. The RTS Link changes that calculation more than any other single variable. If you are approaching 60 with a paid-up property and a portfolio, and you want space, a garden, a study, a guest room, a home that in Singapore would cost $3 million, Johor Bahru with a 5-minute train is no longer a compromise. It is an option that did not exist 3 years ago. The action now. Go to cpf.gov.sg and open your retirement dashboard. Write down your projected CPF life payout. Go to numbeo.com and run the cost of living comparison between Singapore and Johor Bahru using your current monthly spending. Write down both numbers. Forget between what you need, what CPF provides, and what Johor costs. That gap is the conversation. Run it with real numbers before you decide it is not for you. 6 months after that Tuesday night at the kitchen table, Hafiz took a day trip to Johor Bahru. He walked through Mount Austin. He looked at a freehold terraced house. He sat in a kopitiam and had a meal for 12 ringgit, and did the mental arithmetic of what his daily life would look like on this side of the Causeway. He has not sold the flat. He has not submitted an MM2H application. But he came home and did something he had never done. He opened a brokerage account and set up a monthly RSP of $300 into CSPX. He made his first voluntary CPF top-up of $4,000. He started building the side of the ledger that gives him options. Because the most expensive retirement decision in Singapore is not buying a car. It is not upgrading to a condo. It is deciding the question of where to live in retirement is somebody else's question, or a question for later, or a question that does not apply to you. Priya, 3 floors up, is having Saturday morning kopi in her garden in Johor. The same time she used to spend queuing at the Woodlands coffee shop. Different price, different amount of space, same cup. The 5-minute train opens at the end of this year. By the time it does, the people who ran these numbers early will have already made their decisions. Some to go, some to stay, consciously, with clear eyes. And some still deciding, which is not a problem as long as deciding is actually what they are doing and not simply not looking. You now have the numbers. What are you going to do with them? If this video changed how you see the math, subscribe, because the next video is on exactly how to structure your CPF, your Singapore portfolio, and your assets if the cross-border option is something you are taking seriously. The numbers nobody shows you before you sign anything. So who should be running these numbers right now? If you own a fully paid up HDB, a 4-room in Woodlands, a 5-room in Tampines, a flat in Queenstown worth close to $1 million, and your CPF life projection sits between $1,400 and $2,000 a month, and you're between 5 and 10 years from retirement, this is not a question about whether you like Malaysia. This is a question about whether the asset you are living in is producing the return it could produce, or whether it is a cage you have named a home. Every year you remain in that flat, you are making an implicit decision. I prefer to live here rather than convert this asset into income. That can be the right decision. It needs to be a conscious one. If you are 45 to 55 with Singapore income, you can earn remotely or earn across the border in a JS-SEZ office, and you are watching $3,600 a month go into a 2-bedroom OCR rental. The RTS Link changes that calculation more than any other single variable. If you are approaching 60 with a paid-up property and a portfolio, and you want space, a garden, a study, a guest room, a home that in Singapore would cost $3 million, Johor Bahru with a 5-minute train is no longer a compromise. It is an option that did not exist 3 years ago. The action now? Go to cpf.gov.sg and open your retirement dashboard. Write down your projected CPF life payout. Go to numbeo.com and run the cost of living comparison between Singapore and Johor Bahru using your current monthly spending. Write down both numbers. The gap between what you need, what CPF provides, and what Johor costs. That gap is the conversation. Run it with real numbers before you decide it is not for you. 6 months after that Tuesday night at the kitchen table, Hafiz took a day trip to Johor Bahru. He walked through Mount Austin. He looked at a freehold terraced house. He sat in a kopitiam and had a meal for 12 ringgit, and did the mental arithmetic of what his daily life would look like on this side of the Causeway. He has not sold the flat. He has not submitted an MM2H application. But he came home and did something he had never done. He opened a brokerage account and set up a monthly RSP of $300 into CSPX. He made his first voluntary CPF top-up of $4,000. He started building the side of the ledger that gives him options. Because the most expensive retirement decision in Singapore is not buying a car. It is not upgrading to a condo. It is deciding the question of where to live in retirement is somebody else's question, or a question for later, or a question that does not apply to you. Priya, 3 floors up, is having Saturday morning kopi in her garden in Johor. The same time she used to spend queuing at the Woodlands coffee shop. Different price, different amount of space, same cup. The 5-minute train opens at the end of this year. By the time it does, the people who ran these numbers early will have already made their decisions. Some to go, some to stay, consciously, with clear eyes, and some still deciding, which is not a problem, as long as deciding is actually what they are doing, and not simply not looking. You now have the numbers. What are you going to do with them? If this video changed how you see the math, subscribe, because the next video is on exactly how to structure your CPF, your Singapore portfolio, and your assets if the cross-border option is something you are taking seriously. The numbers nobody shows you before you sign anything.